Tonight on Localite with John Compton, biologist, wildlife expert, author, and Gorge Ecology Institute founder, Bill Weiler, has some helpful advice on maintaining a safe, fun environment for Gorge residents, visitors, and animals alike. That's all right now on Localite.
Bill, thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, my pleasure. It's interesting stuff that you've been involved with, but you grew up in Pennsylvania.
That's right.
So growing up in Pennsylvania, was that part of what got you interested in wildlife and preservation and that sort of thing?
Very much. I spent the summers in the Pocono Mountains where our family had a few cabins, and they let us pretty much roam around at our will, me and my cousins, and we came across a lot of species of wildlife and had a great time out in the woods in summers, and that was huge, I think, in terms of influencing me in terms of my love for nature and for wildlife. And actually, when I was 10 years old, I decided I wanted to be a wildlife biologist.
Really?
Yes.
So you knew at 10?
At 10 years old, I knew. But then we moved to L.A., and that took a pause for a bit.
Whole different kind of wildlife.
Right. But I went to school at Oregon State, and that got me to the Northwest, and I majored in wildlife, got my degree in wildlife. But then after that, it even took me another 14 years before I actually got my first chance to work as a wildlife biologist.
Okay. Now, where was that? Was that in Washington?
It was. And I guess my only job advice to folks is if you're really interested in some type of career or position and there's no opening, is to volunteer first. That's exactly what I did for a year and a half. The gentleman that I volunteered for took a different position, happened to be on the interviewing team, and said because of the time I'd volunteered with them, I had my first stint with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife as a habitat biologist in 1990.
Oh, okay. And that was in Washington?
That was it.
So did you have to move up from the LA area to volunteer?
No, I was already living in the Gorge at that time in 1990. Yes, I bought 20 acres near Lisle. I had to commute to Yakima at first because I covered the central Washington area. But finally I got my time. The biologist who covered Klickitat County retired, and in 2001 I finally got to work out of my home.
All right. Wonderful. So tell me a bit about a biologist in that role and what exactly that means, what you do.
Well, I could have put on my business card that I make people mad for a living, which is really not what I wanted to do, but natural resource issues are quite intense. You deal with folks that have been dealing with their property for years. They have certain ideas and plans for what they want to do, and here comes this guy from the government that has some different ideas. And so it's a constant challenge. I was a regulator. I actually did write permits for folks that wanted to do projects that involved fish-bearing streams. So it was kind of a tough role for me. I consider myself a pretty nice guy, but it was also an interesting challenge into coming to consensus with landowners. And I was really pleased that I think about 95% of the time we were able to find ways to agree. They weren't exactly what we wanted, certainly not what the landowner wanted, but I think that's pretty much the message, when you deal with the issues of natural resource, is that there's going to be some compromise involved.
Yeah.
And sitting around the kitchen table with the family, telling them where I'm coming from, where the state's coming from, listening to where they're coming from, and try to find commonality was the most satisfying part of the job. But still, there were some times you couldn't come to consensus, and that meant lawsuits, that meant some angry exchanges sometimes. But those issues still continue here in the Gorge.
Yep.
Still natural resource-based. Recreation has become a huge issue in terms of its impact on fish and wildlife. People don't think about that much. But so I'm now happy to be out of that regulatory mold and more of a consultant, helping people that move to the Gorge for the first time, that may not have a clue about how to deal with these issues here, helping people that want to do nice things for their property in terms of wildlife and fish enhancement. So now I'm in a positive role, and I'm enjoying that much more.
Nice. Well, in that role that you were in, where you, in a sense, had to enforce regulations and uphold laws and things like that, and the challenges that came with that, what would you say to people that are currently in those situations and dealing with possibly a government official and having to, having been on the other side, having to be the one, like you said, I'm a nice guy. What would you tell people as far as this is something you should remember when you're working with these folks? And does the government have our best interest?
Well, I certainly hope so. It's different. When I was in Yakima, I wasn't living in the community. And so I was dealing with folks that I wouldn't have to see at the market or at a baseball game or something like that. When you live in the community, I think it takes on a whole different aspect. And so, it's important, I think, for the regulators to actually be in the community because they understand more of the issues and they know some of the folks. In 1995, my home was almost flooded out. And at 2 in the morning, I noticed someone on a backhoe driving up my driveway. And I was astonished that someone would be coming to help me out at 2 in the morning when my home was just about to be flooded. Well, this is the gentleman that put in the culvert that had been plugged up, and in one fell swoop, he picked up the culvert, and the house was saved, and he disappeared. Well, a year later, he had an application to subdivide his place. And so coming up to his place and having to deal with that, that after he'd saved my home, it was, was humbling. It was humbling.
Yeah.
The main thing for landowners here in the Gorge is to want to give yourself lots of time to plan. Give yourself lots of time for your project. Besides Fish and Wildlife, there's ecology, there's the county, there's the Gorge Commission. All those folks may come into play. Understand that this is part of the way of doing business here. And give yourself a lot of time. Have them come out to your place. Have them listen to you. And I think that you'll be set. Even the Gorge Commission has a wonderful record, I think, of approving about 95, 96% of all the applicants and all the applications that come across their desk.
Really?
So, you're more than likely going to achieve what you want to achieve. And if you can be willing to compromise again and not expect that your grandiose plans will all occur, then I think you're going to be just fine.
So just really a realistic approach and allow yourself plenty of time.
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, when we come back, I want to talk about your piece of property in Lyle and some of the things that maybe you've learned from living there and maybe some of the challenges you found with your own property and being in the position that you were, and then also the Ecology Institute. So we'll discuss some of those things and more when we come back. Be right back.
After the break.
And I certainly met up with many of the same wildlife species that we have in the gorge. Mountain lions a few times, black bear, elk have moved into the area, rattlesnakes, and the ever-present ticks.